Welcome, chemistry students. This is the first video in a two-part series of how to graph. And this video is going to focus on how to actually get a graph into an Excel file. So we will make many graphs throughout the course of this school year, and the green sheet that you have has all the words that I'm going to be saying during this video. So it's really important that as we move out of this unit, when we need to make graphs, you come back to these videos or that green sheet to get help on how to make them properly. So the first thing we have to do is we actually need to get data entered. So you can see that I already have my spreadsheet set up on the screen. You guys need to do the same. So find the Excel file through your Start menu, open up a blank sheet, and enter the data you see on the top right corner of your green sheet. That's the same data I have here. Go ahead and hit pause now and come on back once you've got it entered. All right, I'm assuming you have your data entered, so let's go ahead and let's talk about why we do graphs and how to get a graph actually into the screen. A lot of the math that we do in chemistry can be related to the slope of a line. So instead of going through all the calculations ourselves, we can use the slope of a line to get a much better feel for the trend that our data is showing. And we'll talk a lot about that in the second video. So this video, we're just going to make sure that we set our graph up correctly. So our purpose of the video is to get the White Sox team batting average. And for those of you who aren't familiar with how to calculate batting average, when you calculate batting average, it's going to be equal to the number of hits that you have over the number of at-bats that you had. So if you look at this data, we have the number of hits and the number of at-bats for a bunch of different Chicago White Sox. So what we want to do is we want to set up our graph so that the slope of our line will represent this equation, with the number of hits being over the number of our at-bats. But let's talk about how to actually just get a graph in here first. So we're under number 2, now it's time to make a graph. What we're going to do is we're going to put our cursor in any number that we have on the screen. We're going to come to the Insert tab, which is right next to Home, and we're going to choose this scatter plot. Scatter is going to be the most frequently used type of graph in this class. If it's ever going to be different, I'll let you know in the lab, but we're typically going to use scatter plots. And we want to choose the one that does not have any of the lines connected. So we're going to go ahead and choose all these dots. And what's going to come up is your graph. So what we need to do is we need to see if our graph actually shows the number of hits over the number of at-bats. So if you flip your green sheet to the back, I have some frequently asked questions. And this deals with question number 1. How do I know what goes on the Y and what goes on the X? So we're going to talk about the way that we want to calculate the number of we want to calculate batting average with this. Since we know that slope is equal to rise over run, we need to make sure that our rise, well, here, let's put this up here, slope equals rise over run. So since we know that slope equals rise over run, we need to make sure that our rise represents our number of hits and our run represents our number of at-bats. So basically we want to make sure our hits is on the Y and our number of at-bats is on the X. If we look at our data right now, we can see that we've got 500 on the Y-axis, and that does not make sense for hits because the highest number of hits we have is 116. It does make sense for at-bats though. So right now what that means is our graph is flipped. We don't have the right data on the correct axis. So how the heck do we go ahead and fix that? We're going to pick up now on the front side of that green sheet under number 2, letter D. When you want to switch the X and Y axis, it all starts by right-clicking on any data point that you have. So just right-click on any data point, and then what you're going to choose is select data from the menu that comes up. When you click on that, this dialog box is going to come up. The easiest way to make sure that you end up with the correct X and Y axis is just remove everything. You're going to see it's going to clear your graph, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to add in a new data series. So click the Add button, and we're going to title it White Sox Team Batting Average. So whatever you know it is that you are calculating, we're going to go ahead and we're going to do that. Now what we want to do next is we want to select what's on the X and Y axis, and you do that by clicking on these red boxes. So click on this little red arrow for the X axis, and we know from this equation that we want our run to be the number of at-bats. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to highlight from 442 over to 250, and then I'm going to hit the red arrow again. And you can see that now some stuff has popped up in that series. So we're good to go. Now we want to do the same exact thing for our Y-axis. We want to click that little red arrow, and we want our rise, which is our y-axis, to be the number of hits. So we're going to take 116 down to 5 and hit the red arrow again, and then hit OK, and then hit OK again. And you can see that our graph now has our rise as our hits and our run as our at-bats. So to walk you through that process again, right-click on any data point, choose Select Data, remove whatever you have, and choose Add. Title it so it makes sense to what the graph is showing. Click on the red arrow for the x-axis, determine what you want your run to be, which is number of at-bats, and highlight from the top number to the bottom number. Hit the red arrow again, and do the exact same process for your y-axis. Determine what you want your rise to be, which in this case is number of hits, and highlight from your top number to your bottom number, hit the arrow again, and then hit OK twice. So now we have our graph. What we need to do now is we need to make sure that we have axis titles and we have a title for our graph. So let's start with the axis titles first. Anytime that you want to edit titles, it's going to be under this chart tools that's going to become green and highlighted on the top of your screen. Under the layout tab, so this is under step 3 now, under the layout tab, we're going to choose axis titles, and we're just going to start with the horizontal axis, which is your x-axis, because it comes up first. And this axis is going to be titled number of at-bats. Now, if you had a unit of measurement, such as grams or seconds or milliliters, you would also want to include that as a part of your title. But we just simply have number of at-bats as our unit. We're going to do the same thing for our y-axis, and you can choose any of these formats. It doesn't matter to me what you choose. And this one, because our rise is number of hits, that's what we're going to title this axis as. So now we have our axis titles. Those are easy. Your chart title is going to be a little bit more complex. If you follow along with the back side of your green sheet under frequently asked question number 2, it asks how do you title a graph. The title of the graph is always going to follow the same format. You're going to have the purpose of your graph in the front, and then you're going to have whatever's on the y-axis as a function of your x-axis. So for example, this is showing us the batting average of our Chicago White Sox. Oops, that's how I spell Chicago. After you put that purpose, you're going to put a colon, and that's going to separate the purpose from what you have as your y and your x-axis. And so it's always going to go y as a function of x. So in this case, our y is our number of hits. Then we're going to put the words as a function of, ooh, that's nice spell function, number of at-bats. And then you just hit enter. Oops, don't hit enter. Click out of that. And then now you have a nice chart title, and you can change the side of your you can change the size of your graph if you'd like to make your title a different size, and that way you've got your nice graph. So these are the steps you need to take in order to just get a graph into your Excel file. The second video is going to talk about, now that we have the data, what do we do with it? If you have any questions as you go through this process, please pause and rewatch parts of the video or call me over if you're having extreme difficulty. I'll see you guys back in video number 2.